Greetings fellow members of the Esoteric Order of Gamers. Today we're going to get into a bit of Gaslands, a game by Mike Hutchinson. It's post-apocalyptic vehicular combat and it's all about converting Hot Wheels type cars and turning them into Mad Max type crazy things and moving them around on board and smashing them into each other and destroying things and stuff. Of course, back in the day there was Dark Future by Games Workshop, a bit of a classic. Not something I played very often, the rules were slightly impenetrable. And I did start converting some of the cars in here and doing a bit of work on it, but then I sort of gave up. So I'm going to open this up and check out what I've got inside there and see if I can work on it. And I've got some brand new Hot Wheels cars which I can post-apocalyptize. So stick with me and let's see what comes out of this. I've never done it before, so anything might happen. So I thought I'd get started by checking out my old Dark Future box and seeing what was inside. And you can see I had quite a few cars. A lot of these are the original Dark Future cars, but there's a few Matchbox Hot Wheels type cars in there as well. I've got a good selection of weapons from the original set. There's some motorbike figures there. And what else? Oh, these are all the original components. I've actually got two lots of Dark Future components in there. Not that I think I'll ever get around to playing this game again. Let's have a look at these Hot Wheel cars I just bought. Went down to the shops and bought these. They're pretty cheap. And you can see they're roughly the same scale as the Dark Future cars, which is good. This is an old car that I did ages and ages ago, along with the Dark Future car that I did. And pretty rough paint job, but still looks pretty good. Here are all my cars laid out in a row. At the front here, we've got the Dark Future cars, and at the back, we've got some metal cars, and this weird one I picked up, which appealed in some way. Here's all my weapons, and here's a whole collection of bits and bobs that I've picked up over the years. I've got some tools, some wire, craft knife, glue, pliers, hot glue gun, some metal snippers, a bit of metal, and of course some sheets of styrene and even some sheets from the back of a notepad to give me some plastic sheeting to use. Right, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is super glue the wheels so they stop turning. We don't want the cars running off in the middle of a game. I've also found that putting a bit of green stuff in there gives it a bit of extra strength. Sometimes the super glue doesn't hold it quite strongly enough. Then I just start looking through my bits, through the weapons and through these extra bits that I've got and fiddling around. I started cutting out some bits of plastic card, and my original idea was to make a sort of dozer blade on the front of this car, but it didn't quite work out in the end, so I abandoned it and started making armor plates for the windows. You can snap off bits of thicker card, or you can just use really, really thin card actually. And you can see I've got a selection of weapons, so I was trying out different weapons on the car and seeing how they work. A couple of machine guns up the front maybe, I don't know. I ended up just going for one on the hood, and I used a turret on the roof. So here I am cutting out some thinner bits of plastic. Again, this is just from the back of a notebook. And be very careful with your fingers, of course, when you're doing this, because it's very hard to keep tiny pieces still while you're cutting them. In fact, here I'm using the edge of a set of clippers just to hold it in place while I cut out a little strip. This strip I used for the windscreen, with a strip you can see out of. And here it is, all stuck together. So it's pretty rough and ready, but remember, this is post-apocalyptic. So the great thing is you don't have to worry too much about perfection. You can be really rough. I've stuck some bits on it, a few little tanks on the back side of the car there, and some armor plating. A quick black primer coat over the top, and it's really starting to come together now. Now, I realised at this point that really I should bash up the car a little bit more. It's looking a bit smooth and clean, and we can't have that when we're Mad Maxing through the wilderness. So I thought, how am I going to bash this up a little bit? My first attempt was to get a drill. I drilled in some bullet holes in the side. In the end, really, I could have painted these on. It really didn't make too much difference whether they were drilled or painted. And then I started trying to bash up the car a little bit, just with the tin snips here, giving it a bit of whack. But actually these cards are metal, so it doesn't really work too well. Yeah, keep trying, Peter. Today I was at the hardware store and I came across this, a Dremel 3000. Now I'd seen this on some videos online about converting cars, and it's a variable speed rotary tool, and I thought not only is it handy for doing some work on these cars, but it might be handy for various hobby projects as well. So I kind of bought myself one. Whoops. And here it is. It's a rather nice thing. Now the good thing about this particular set is that it comes with a sort of pen attachment, this one here, so you can actually hold it like a pen and get quite a lot of control when you're engraving things and doing this various stuff. So you can see I've just got this thing on the end, which is sort of just a general engraving, bashing up kind of tool. And I'm going to give it a go on this other car here. You should see I've also gone over this with a small file, like one of these, just to rough up the surface somewhat and make it look a lot more beaten up. This was all shiny and clean before, and we don't want that because it's post-apocalyptic. We're all bashed up, so give it a going over with a file. And then let's see what we can do with this thing. Now, of course, you want to follow all the usual safety instructions when using a tool like this. Some eye protection, and usually if you have an item you're using with this, you want to have it clamped, but I'm just doing a tiny bit of work on this and not doing anything crazy, so this should be all right just holding it. So it's got a variable speed. Sit on about that, and then just go crazy. Also, the Dremel tool can be used to drill out the rivets in metal cars, so you can take apart the body from the chassis if you want to separate those for painting. Now, the important thing with the Dremel tool is that you don't have to push or put any force behind it. You just let the tool do the work. So, as you can see, I've made a complete another mess of this thing. That's really had a good battering, especially around the windscreen. But that's a good start for some later conversion. So it's time to get painting. So I picked my base colour and dried most of it out on a paper towel and dry brushed my black car and gave it a pretty good solid dry brushing all over, keeping it quite light on the amount of paint so it doesn't go on too thickly. Added a little bit of white to that mix and dry brushed again to bring up the colour. Remember, this is going to be really grotty and dirty, so you don't want to go too clean, unless of course you want a bright colour scheme. Going a little bit brighter again, just on the edges. That's starting to look pretty good. Now it's time to paint the metal areas. So I got some bolt gun metal or something similar and started painting the guns and the other metal areas on the car. So I've got a gun up in the turret there and a gun on the hood. It's a bit of metal bumper bars at the back. And of course painting the armour plating. The wheels. And look at that, looking pretty good. Starting to come together now. What this needs is some washing and weathering. So first the wash, and I've got a mixture here of brown and black washes from Games Workshop. That's Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil. And then I'm just applying that liberally to all the metal areas. The brown gives it a bit of a grungy, oily feel. Now these great Tamiya weathering powders, they're really useful. And this one is a rust colour. And of course, after all the inks have dried thoroughly, make sure it's really, really dry, you can paint on this weathering powder and do it very roughly and get some great effects. Very, very simple to do. And I've got a lighter, more orange weathering powder here. And I add that as well. And again, you don't have to be neat, just be as rough as guts and it'll look great. This bright orange stuff really works well. Now I'm just dry brushing on a bit of brown, just a bit of dirt and mud and grime, building up the fact that it looks like it's been going through the desert. Now I'm using a bit of bright orange, and I'm watering down that quite a bit and just painting that in the recesses of some of the metal areas, so it gives me some real bright orange rust in there. You can wipe it with a finger, you can dilute it. Again, you don't have to be perfect at all. This is the apocalypse, after all, the post-apocalypse. Next I've got some silver colour, and I'm going to highlight throughout. And also you can paint on some paint chips and everything with this to make it look really roughed up. But here, just along the edge of those metal panels, this really brings it to life. Highlighting that and also making it look as if it's been bashed and the original metal is showing through. And there we have it. My first attempt at modelling and painting up a post-apocalyptic car for decades, really. I haven't done it for a long, long time, and that's turned out pretty well. Of course, this is only my first attempt, and there's all kinds of things I can try. You can be really creative putting these cars together and doing whatever you want. You can buy the weapons online from various manufacturers. And here's the old one I did, which was this, the idea here was it was a police car that it was stolen by thugs and they'd painted nasty slogans all over it. But they go together pretty well, and they were done decades apart. That's it, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this look at converting and painting cars for Gaslands and other post-apocalyptic vehicular war games. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget, orderofgamers.com is the website. I'm on all the social media. I'm also on Patreon. And thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time. Vroom, 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 vroom. Vroom, 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 vroom.